The morning broadcast of Today with Jenna and Friends had been promoted for weeks as one of the season's biggest events. Johnny Depp, a man who rarely sat for live interviews anymore, was finally making an appearance to talk about his career and his future. By the time the studio doors opened, fans filled every seat, buzzing with excitement. Cameras flashed as he stepped out, the energy electric. Jenna Bush Hager greeted him with warmth and applause, but even in those first moments, a certain tension hovered over the stage. The interview began harmlessly, with talk of his films and his music projects. Johnny answered politely, leaning into his usual charm, but before long, Jenna steered the conversation toward more delicate ground. She asked about his turbulent past, subjects he had avoided for months. His expression stiffened, though he stayed. Measured, his voice steady. Still, the shift in tone was unmistakable. When her co-host pressed further, asking if Hollywood had truly forgiven him or if he still lived under the shadow of public battles, Johnny leaned back, his jaw tightening. "I came here to talk about art, music, the future," he said quietly. "Not to relive a circus." The studio audience stirred, a murmur running through the crowd. Jenna tried to smooth it over with a nervous laugh, but her follow-up question pressed again on his reputation. Johnny's patience was thinning, his eyes narrowing slightly as if signaling a warning. He pushed back with stories about his current projects, anecdotes from recent sets, even sprinkling in lighthearted remarks. But it was clear the producers, speaking into Jenna's earpiece, wanted more. The questions circled back to scandal. Adjusting his bracelets, Johnny gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It seems every time I sit down, people don't want to hear about the art. They want the scandal. If that's what you want, maybe I'm in the wrong chair." The crowd gasped, half shocked, half thrilled. Jenna, pressing on, asked if he felt victimized by the media. He let out a bitter laugh. Victimized? No. Just tired. Tired of answering the same questions. Tired of defending myself to people who've already made up their minds. His words drew some applause, but his tone carried exhaustion. The co-host attempted to shift to his band, but Johnny cut in sharply. "You want to know about my art? Listen to it. Watch it. Don't expect me to sit here and beg for forgiveness on cue." The atmosphere grew heavier. Then came the breaking point. Jenna mentioned critics who doubted his comeback. Johnny's face darkened. In one swift motion, he removed his microphone, tossed it onto the couch, and stood up. The audience erupted into chatter, stunned as cameras scrambled to follow him. Jenna reached forward, her voice almost pleading. "Johnny, wait. We want to hear your story." But he shook his head. "You don't want my story. You want headlines." And with that, he walked off stage. The studio dissolved into chaos. Producers barked instructions, unsure whether to cut to commercial. Jenna sat frozen for a beat, before forcing a smile. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, live television is unpredictable. We wish Johnny the best." Polite applause followed, though. The room buzzed with whispers and the glow of cell phones capturing every angle. Within minutes, the clip was already bouncing around the internet. Backstage, Johnny's team shielded him as he headed toward the exit. A producer begged him to return for a closing remark, but he brushed it off. He looked drained, muttering that he'd had enough of this game. Staff stood frozen, murmuring about fallout. Jenna stayed on set, texting between breaks, her face strained behind practiced smiles. She knew the headlines were already being written. By the hour's end, social media exploded. Hashtags like Cedern Johnny Walks Off and Cedern Day Show Drama trended worldwide. Fans rallied behind him, praising his refusal to play into what they called media harassment. Others criticized him as unprofessional. TikTok filled with dramatic edits of him tossing the mic. Twitter lit up with celebrity commentary, some siding with Johnny, others saying Jenna had simply done her job. The walk-off had become a spectacle bigger than the interview itself. That evening, entertainment outlets ran wall-to-wall coverage. Some cast Johnny as the victim of ambush journalism. Others painted him as a man unwilling to face hard truths. Jenna released a statement through NBC praising his artistry and insisting she never meant to upset him, only to highlight a journey of resilience. Johnny's camp remained silent, which only fueled the speculation further. In the days that followed, the fallout grew. The clip became one of the most re-watched moments in the show's history, spiking ratings but creating headaches for the network. Johnny disappeared from public view, seen only once slipping into a Los Angeles recording studio, avoiding questions. For fans, the walk-off was either a raw, honest stand against relentless scrutiny or a sign that his comeback was still fragile. Whatever the interpretation, the moment burned itself into live television history. 2 days later, speculation hit fever pitch when Johnny was spotted boarding a private plane in New York, trailed by his team, declining to speak. Tabloids guessed he was flying to Europe to join his band. Others suggested he was retreating, avoiding the glare. Supporters gathered at airports with signs, cheering as though he were a rock star escaping chaos. Back in New York, Jenna addressed the incident at the top of her show. "We had an intense moment this week," she said, her tone carefully measured. "I respect Johnny's choice to walk away. Live TV can be raw, but I hope someday we can sit down again with peace." The audience clapped politely, though her face betrayed a trace of frustration. That same day, reports surfaced of NBC executives holding emergency meetings. Ratings from the Depp episode had skyrocketed, but criticism was mounting. A leaked email revealed producers had indeed instructed Jenna and her co-host to push harder with controversial questions. The leak spread online, shifting public sentiment even further toward Johnny. Fans accused NBC of exploiting him for drama, and petitions circulated demanding an apology. Johnny, however, stayed quiet. His silence became part of the story. Rumors swirled. Was he refusing all interviews, or was he planning a carefully chosen comeback sit-down? Others claimed he was letting the storm pass while pouring himself into music. Inside NBC, tension built. Advertisers began to weigh in. Some warned producers that aligning with what many saw as unfair journalism could damage their brands. Others argued the spike in ratings proved the strategy worked. Hollywood agents, watching closely, whispered doubts about sending their clients to the show. No one wanted to risk becoming the next walk-off headline. The industry had been shaken, the incident turning into a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Johnny resurfaced quietly on stage, not for interviews but for concerts with his band. Fans packed venues holding up signs that read, "We want the art, not the scandal." At one show, between songs, he told the crowd, "Music doesn't interrogate, it just listens." The line ricocheted across social media, hailed as his answer to Jenna's probing questions. Clips of the remark went viral, shared as a statement of defiance. Every performance seemed to double as a reclaiming of his narrative. Weeks later, the moment was still being replayed on screens and dissected in columns. It wasn't just an awkward interview anymore. It had grown into a cultural flashpoint, a clash between artistry and spectacle, authenticity and sensationalism. The image of Johnny dropping his mic and walking away became iconic, defiant to some, difficult to others. Either way, it was unforgettable. For Johnny, it was proof that he would not be cornered under studio lights. For Jenna and the network, it was a reminder of the risks of chasing headlines. The fallout cemented itself in talk show history, ensuring that Johnny Depp's storm off would live on as one of television's most unforgettable moments.